This sale that's taking place on Monday at Southeby'S, New York, is of the collection of Michael and Judy Steinheartdt. Michael and Judy have been collecting Judaica for over 40 years. The Steinhardts are noted philanthropists. They've been involved in Jewish education and have given over $125 million to charity over the course of their careers. And Mr. Steinheartdt was particularly interested in, as a philanthropist, in collecting. He began with stucco boxes, and his passion grew from there. Over the years, over the past 40 years, he collected one of the most important collections of Judaica by a single person in the world, and the collection is now up for sale. The collection includes some early pieces beginning with the antiquities, and then it moves to the medieval period. It has an enormous breadth and depth of the collection, something from every period of Jewish life, from antiquities through the medieval period, through the Baroque, through the 18th century, the 19th century, the 20th century. The star of this exhibition and sale is the magnificent copy of the Mishnah Torah that was written and illustrated in Italy in 1457. It is an absolutely outstanding manuscript. And in addition to that, the sale also includes many beautiful pieces of silver, menorahs, Kiddush cups, silver tassim, Torah shields, and numerous other objects. The sale also includes a large amount of textiles. This is the most important group of Hebrew and Jewish-related textiles to come to auction ever. There are over 90 textiles on sale. We have everything from early Torah binders from Italy that were created by women and sewn and then donated to the synagogue in memory or in honor of their husbands. In fact, in Italy, the custom was, as we know from the Mantua prayer books printed in 1557, that on occasion mishaberachs were made for women who actually sewed textiles for the community for use in the synagogue. We're looking at a lamp that was created for a very wealthy member of the Frankfurt Jewish community in the beginning of the 18th century. The Frankfurt Jewish community, and Frankfurt as a whole, experienced a devastating fire at the beginning of the 18th century and wiped out and destroyed many of their silver objects, and there was a flurry of creation of new objects after that. This is an elaborate Sabbath lamp, including figures showing all of members depicting with implements of the Jewish holidays, a shofar, a Havdalah, Hanukkah, lulav and etrog on the other side.
John Ward, and I'm head of the silver department, which also covers all of the Judaic metalwork in these sales. And what we're going to be looking at here is an Elia Shore etrog box. Elia Shore is born in Eastern Europe. He goes to Paris in the 1930s to work on a grant to study. There he meets Manet Katz. He's also part of the same group of Cubist-influenced artists in Paris. People like Chagall, Picasso, and a lot of his work is very similar to what Chagall's doing in terms of a Cubist aesthetic for the figures, but very much a shtetl, Eastern European traditional life, subject matter. And you can see that on this wonderful etrog box that he made. Shore's not a chaser. He isn't bringing this out into great repoussé work. What he's doing is actually closer in technique to cut paperwork, where he outlines and he cuts out his figures and he gives them a little bit of depth by pushing them forward. But it's really the play of different planes between the cutout work and the background for it, and in the engraved details that gives a sense of depth to his object without giving it nearly the same embossed depth that you get, for instance, in some of the Italian pieces in this same sale.
How much is something like this?
I believe this one's in for 30 to 50,000. He really becomes well known, as an artist in New York, after the war in the 1950s and 1960s, and I think when you look at something like this, you understand why. There's a wonderful charm to this. There's a vigor and a nostalgia that's combined, with a Cubist, almost Art Deco aesthetic for some of these things.
This is a ketubah from Amsterdam from the late 17th century, 1695. It was used by a member of the Abarbanel family, the grandson of the great-grandson of the famous Abarbanel, who left Spain. Some of his descendants ended up in Amsterdam. And what you see here is a printed and engraved border that's then filled in by hand for the particulars of the family. This border was first printed in 1660s and then used by the Jewish community of Amsterdam for the next 200 years. A team of Southeby's experts has been working with these objects, examining the history, examining the pieces, checking the provenance and the documentation to make sure that everything is correct as it should be, that the silver, if it has been repaired, is so noted, and that there are no fakes or forgeries that creep in, because we actually stand behind every object we sell. And that's really, when you buy at auction, you make available to people the wealth of knowledge that the experts have accumulated over the last several decades, and one can be secure with that knowledge that you're buying something that's quite correct.
Now, since it's all the product here today is obviously more of a Jewish exhibition, were they authenticated by Jewish experts?
The team of experts working at Southeby's includes the heads of the silver department, John Ward and Kevin Tierney, who have been working with Judaica objects for the last 30 years. Myself and my colleague David Wachtel, who've been working with books and manuscripts, both here at Southeby's and at other academic institutions for the last 18 years. And people from the fine arts departments, from the textile departments, everybody contributes their own knowledge to the effort. What we're looking at here is an Esther scroll that was created in the end of the 18th century in northern Italy. And the artist here has created a montage of 28 illustrations from the Esther story, which run both above and below the text. Here we see the hanging of Bigtan and Teresh. Here, Haman is providing Ahasuerus with the money when he asks him for permission to kill all the Jewish people. And here, Mordechai, having heard the news of this impending disaster, is being brought new clothing by Hatach, because he's standing outside the king's gate in sackcloth and cannot go in sackcloth. But the artist has actually also incorporated allegorical personifications into this Esther scroll decoration as well. So, for example, in Italy, in the 17th and 18th century, artists were using allegorical images to convey ideas. Because there was a rabbinic debate as to whether or not one could include extra text on an Esther scroll, there was the idea that perhaps one should create a separate blessing panel that would have the brachot recited before and after the recitation of the Megillah, of the Esther scroll. And in this way, as the panel was separate but wrapped around the scroll, you would have the blessings at the ready on the holiday of Purim, and yet it wouldn't be attached to the scroll, so you would avoid adding any extra text. What you're looking here is the blessings panel that accompanies this magnificent monumental Esther scroll, with an illustration of the triumph of Mordechai, who is leading, Haman is leading him on a horse over here, the hanging of Haman, the jubilation and the dancing and the celebration of the Jews.
So this is 1756.
Yeah, and here's Tafkuf Tetvav.
Wow.
That I mentioned, this is from 1754.
So these are German
Wimpels,
Wimpels?
Torah binders. This is a painted example. This is actually signed, and the date is obviously there, but we have the date of the birth of the child, 1754. This actually was a Torah binder that was made for the son of the Chazan in the Copenhagen Jewish community. This is from 1820, 1821 possibly. The aleph is smaller. This is a golden headdress known as a golden gargush. It was worn by a Yemenite bride at her wedding and then formed part of her dowry. We see on it coins and all kinds of beautiful silver gilt medallions, as well as these baskets which hung down, and it's elaborately sewn with seed pearls and silver metalwork. And it's said that when she needed money, at some times coins were removed and used for other things. This was part of a bride's dowry. So this is called a kupka, and this is made out of silver and gold wrapped thread in a technique known as Spanier-Arbeit, which was a technique that the Jews were practicing in Galicia, particularly in the town of Sasov. And we have beautiful atarot from. We have beautiful examples of this technique used for talesim, for women's headdresses that they would wear on Shabbat and festivals and weddings and other occasions. For men's kippot, these are from the 19th century, and you see an example of a woman wearing a kupka over here in this beautiful Marisi Gottlieb painting. And then we believe that this is from the 19th century. This is European shtreimel, and it's small, and we believe that it was probably worn by a child who is the son of the Rebbe, one of the rabbinic courts, perhaps Regin or one of the others, and it's actually wonderfully done in blue velvet, which...
And what's this metal?
This box is the actual original box that it came in. I'd like to point out one of the most beautiful micrographic Omer calendars that has ever appeared. Micrography is the art of writing in miniature script using Hebrew letters and creating beautiful forms out of the words. And what you're seeing over here is an artist who created a tree where each one of the apples or the fruit is another day of the Omer, so that's the Omer part of it. And included in this micrography are the books of Esther, Ruth, Shir Hashirim, and Echa. And the imagery is really quite unusual. The figures are labeled. This is King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech. This one is labeled Batya Bat Paro, Batya the daughter of Paro. This woman is labeled Queen Esther. And this man is labeled Hatach. And the artist did not sign or date this work, and actually it was a mystery for a little while as to how someone could create so elaborate a piece of Jewish art without signing or dating it. It was a little frustrating, actually. And one of the well-known collectors whom I reached out to mentioned to me that he had seen a similar piece in the Scribble Museum years before that was much smaller and simpler, and that I should look into it and see if it perhaps wasn't written by the same person. And that piece, in fact, was quite similar and was signed and dated by Dov Margoliet, the son of Asher Zelig of Zebrugin. And he was working in Bonn, in Germany, Bonn, the town of Bonn, in 1830. So we actually have a place and a date and a person.
The one that's similar to this,
yes.
Signed that
and
name.
Dated, yes.
So you estimate it was around 1830. Now, how much
Exactly.
is something worth?
This is estimated at $50,000 to $70,000. We also were able to date it because before I found the comparable piece, I looked very carefully at the costume. And some of the costume is, very old. This looks like Henry VIII, if you imagine it, but some of the costume looked particular to the 19th century. And a colleague of mine who specializes in costume history was able to look at the women's fashions and say, yes, this fashion is exactly what would have been in style between the years 1825 and 1828. So before we actually had a name or a date of when this artist was working, we already were able to say that it was circa 1825. So the other piece confirmed.
So you basically boiled it down within 5 years.
Yes, that's correct.